Hey guys, tonight we begin with something extraordinary. Imagine falling asleep 500 feet above the ground, cradled by branches older than civilization itself, in a bedroom suspended between earth and sky. We're talking about the world's most spectacular treehouse skyscrapers, where luxury meets nature in ways that will leave you breathless. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You're lying in a king-sized bed wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets, but instead of city lights streaming through your window, you see nothing but endless canopy stretching toward the horizon. Instead of traffic noise, there's the gentle whisper of wind through leaves. Instead of concrete and steel, your bedroom is built around the living trunk of a 1,000-year-old redwood. This isn't fantasy. These treehouse skyscrapers exist, and they're redefining what it means to sleep among the clouds. The first time you climb the spiral staircase that winds around the massive trunk, your heart pounds with more than just exertion. Each step takes you further from the familiar ground below and deeper into a world that feels almost mythical. The bark beneath your fingertips is rough and real, scarred by centuries of storms and seasons. But the craftsmanship surrounding it, that's pure modern luxury. Glass walls that seem to dissolve into the forest. Floors that curve organically around the tree's natural growth patterns. Lighting that mimics the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. When you finally reach your bedroom, perched impossibly high in the branches, the first thing that hits you is the silence. Not the dead silence of a soundproofed hotel room, but something deeper. The profound quiet of a forest at rest, broken only by the occasional call of a night bird, or the distant rustle of some creature making its way through the undergrowth far below. It's the kind of silence that makes you realize how much noise you carry with you everywhere, how much mental chatter follows you through your daily life. But let's start from the beginning. How do you even build a skyscraper in a tree? The engineering alone seems impossible. You can't just hammer nails into living wood and hope for the best. These aren't childhood tree houses held together with hope and rusty screws. We're talking about architectural marvels that somehow manage to embrace their host trees without strangling them. Structures that flex and breathe with the natural movement of their living foundations. The secret lies in something called the tension and compression system. Instead of fighting the tree's natural growth and movement, these structures work with it. Cables and joints allow the building to sway gently when the wind picks up, moving in harmony with the tree rather than against it. It's like a dance between human engineering and natural architecture that's been perfecting itself for millennia. Take the mirror cube in Sweden, suspended 12 feet off the ground and completely invisible from certain angles. The exterior walls are covered in mirrors that reflect the surrounding forest so perfectly that birds occasionally fly into them, mistaking the structure for empty air. Inside, the space is surprisingly warm and inviting, all blonde wood and clean lines, with a bed positioned, so you wake up feeling like you're floating in the treetops. Or consider the free spirit spheres on Vancouver Island, where your bedroom is literally a wooden orb suspended from the forest canopy by a web of cables. Sleeping in one feels like being cradled in a giant seed pod, gently rocking with every breeze. The curved walls mean there are no sharp corners, no harsh angles, just the smooth embrace of perfectly crafted cedar that seems to wrap around you like a cocoon. But the crown jewel has to be Tree Hotel's bird's nest in northern Sweden. From the outside, it looks exactly like what the name suggests, a massive bird's nest woven from branches and twigs. But step inside, and you're in a luxury suite that wouldn't look out of place in a 5-star hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer 360-degree views of the boreal forest, while the interior walls are lined with warm birch panels that glow golden in the evening light. The experience of spending a night in one of these elevated sanctuaries goes far beyond just having an unusual place to sleep. There's something primal that happens when you're up in the trees, something that connects you to a part of human nature that's been largely forgotten in our ground-bound modern lives. Our ancestors spent countless generations in the trees, and maybe some genetic memory still whispers to us when we climb back up into the branches. The first night is always the most intense. As darkness falls and the forest comes alive with sounds you can't quite identify, every instinct tells you that you're exposed, vulnerable. But gradually, as your eyes adjust to the darkness and your ears attune to the natural rhythms of the night, something shifts. The fear transforms into wonder. You begin to understand that you're not an intruder in this aerial world. You're a guest, temporarily welcomed into a realm that exists parallel to our own, but operates by entirely different rules. Sleep comes differently up here. Without the constant hum of electricity, the distant rumble of traffic, or the glow of streetlights seeping through curtains, your body remembers older rhythms. You find yourself getting drowsy as the sun sets, not because you're particularly tired, but because darkness triggers something deep in your circadian system that artificial lighting has been disrupting for decades. And the dreams, they're unlike anything you've experienced at ground level. Maybe it's the gentle swaying motion, so subtle you barely notice it while awake, but constant enough to influence your subconscious. Maybe it's the negative ions generated by all that surrounding vegetation, or the increased oxygen levels that come from sleeping in the middle of what's essentially a giant air purifier. Whatever the cause, people consistently report that their dreams in these treehouse skyscrapers are more vivid, more meaningful, and somehow more connected to nature than their usual nighttime adventures. The morning brings its own magic. Instead of jarring awake to an alarm clock, you drift into consciousness as the forest itself awakens around you. Birds begin their dawn chorus, their songs seeming to come from every direction at once. Shafts of golden sunlight pierce through the canopy, creating constantly shifting patterns of light and shadow on your walls. If you're lucky enough to be staying during migration season, you might find yourself at eye level with hawks or eagles riding the thermals, their powerful wings barely moving as they soar past your window. But perhaps the most profound aspect of sleeping in these elevated rooms is how it changes your perspective, literally and figuratively. When you're 500 feet off the ground, surrounded by nothing but forest stretching to the horizon, the problems and stresses that seem so urgent at ground level start to feel remarkably small. There's something about that bird's eye view that puts things in perspective, that reminds you that you're part of something much larger than your daily concerns and anxieties. The builders of these treehouse skyscrapers understand this transformative power. Every detail, from the placement of windows to the choice of materials, is designed to enhance your connection with the natural world, while providing all the comfort and luxury you could want. Solar panels hidden among the branches provide electricity without disturbing the forest canopy. Rainwater collection systems turn storms into showers. Composting toilets eliminate the need for disruptive plumbing, while creating fertilizer for the very trees that support the structure. Some of these aerial hotels take the concept even further, incorporating living walls where moss and ferns grow directly on the interior surfaces, creating a seamless transition between inside and outside. Others feature retractable roofs that can be opened on clear nights, allowing you to fall asleep while gazing up at stars unobscured by light pollution, their ancient light filtered through gently swaying branches. The construction process itself is a marvel of environmental consciousness and engineering precision. Every beam, every panel, every fixture has to be carried up by hand or lifted by crane, then assembled around the living tree without damaging its bark or root system. The trees themselves are carefully selected. not just for their size and strength, but for their health and longevity. After all, you're not just building a hotel room, you're creating a partnership with a living organism that you hope will last for centuries. Different species of trees create entirely different experiences. Sleeping in a redwood treehouse means being surrounded by the quiet majesty of giants that were ancient when Rome was young. These coastal behemoths create a cathedral-like atmosphere, their massive trunks disappearing into misty heights, while their thick bark provides natural insulation and soundproofing. Oak trees, with their gnarled branches and stubborn strength, offer a more intimate experience. Their broad canopies create cozy, enclosed spaces, perfect for smaller structures that feel more like traditional bedrooms. The thick leaves provide excellent privacy and weather protection, while the tree's deep root system ensures stability even in strong winds. Pine trees bring their own unique character to treehouse architecture. The clean scent of resin perfumes the air naturally, creating an aromatherapy experience that's been proven to reduce stress and improve sleep quality. The straight trunks of mature pines also provide excellent structural support for larger platforms and multi-room designs. But beyond the practical considerations, there's an almost spiritual dimension to these elevated sleeping quarters. Many guests report a sense of communion with the tree itself, as if they can feel its slow, patient breathing, its deep connection to the earth below and the sky above. Some describe dreams where they experience the tree's perspective, sensing the network of roots spreading through the soil and the complex chemical communications that flow between forest inhabitants. The sound environment up in the canopy is completely different from ground level. You're above most of the underbrush rustling and small animal movement, but perfectly positioned to hear the conversations of squirrels, the territorial calls of birds, and the whispered secrets that trees share through the wind. It's a layered soundscape that changes throughout the night, creating a natural white noise that's far more soothing than any mechanical fan or sound machine. Weather becomes a completely different experience when your bedroom is suspended in the branches. Rain doesn't just patter on a distant roof, it creates a symphony all around you as millions of drops strike leaves at different heights and angles. The sound builds gradually, starting with the first tentative drops on the uppermost branches, then cascading down through layer after layer of foliage until the entire forest is alive with percussion. Lightning illuminates the canopy from within, creating brief moments where every leaf becomes a stained glass window backlit by electricity. Snow transforms these aerial bedrooms into winter wonderlands that would make any ground-based hotel jealous. The branches collect snow in impossible sculptures, each twig outlined in white, while the wind carves drifts into organic shapes that change by the hour. The insulation provided by the tree's natural architecture means you stay warm and cozy inside, while feeling intimately connected to the winter landscape surrounding you. But it's the storms that truly test both your courage and the engineering brilliance of these structures. When the wind picks up and the whole forest begins to dance, you feel the awesome power of nature in ways that no ground-dwelling human ever could. The tree sways, and your bedroom sways with it, but instead of feeling terrifying, it becomes oddly comforting. You're moving with forces that have shaped this landscape for thousands of years, participating in an ancient rhythm that connects you to every storm that's ever swept through these woods. The different seasons bring entirely different personalities to these elevated sanctuaries. Spring arrives first in the canopy, where buds break weeks before ground-level plants even sense the changing light. You wake up surrounded by the tender green of new leaves, so fresh they seem to glow with their own inner light. The air fills with the sweet scent of tree flowers, and you might find yourself sharing your breakfast with curious squirrels who treat your platform as just another branch in their highway system. Summer brings the full cathedral effect as the canopy closes overhead, creating a green vault that filters sunlight into constantly shifting patterns. The temperature up in the branches stays remarkably stable, cooler than the forest floor during the heat of the day, but warmer at night when the stored solar energy in all that vegetation creates a natural heating system. Moths and fireflies visit your windows after dark, creating a natural light show that no human designer could match. Autumn might be the most spectacular season of all in these treehouse skyscrapers. You're living inside the color change, surrounded by leaves that shift from green to gold to crimson right outside your windows. The smell of decomposing leaves rises from the forest floor below, rich and earthy and full of promise for next year's growth. Migrating birds stop to rest in your host tree, turning your bedroom into a temporary way station for creatures traveling thousands of miles. Winter strips away all the decoration, revealing the essential architecture of both the tree and the structure built within it. The bare branches create intricate patterns against grey skies, while snow accumulates in the angles and joints of your dwelling, outlining every beam and rafter in white. It's a time of stark beauty, when the engineering feat of suspending a comfortable bedroom hundreds of feet off the ground becomes most apparent. The people who seek out these elevated sleeping experiences tend to be a particular type of adventurer. Not the adrenaline junkies who throw themselves off cliffs or race motorcycles, but the inner explorers who understand that the most profound journeys happen inside your own consciousness. They're writers looking for inspiration, executives desperate to escape the crushing weight of constant connectivity, couples hoping to rediscover romance away from the distractions of modern life. Many guests report that their first night in a treehouse skyscraper becomes a watershed moment, a before and after point in their relationship with the natural world. City dwellers who've spent years insulated from weather and seasons find themselves acutely aware of wind direction, humidity changes, and the subtle shifts in light that mark the passage of time without clocks. It's as if sleeping up in the branches reactivates dormant senses that humans used for millennia but have largely abandoned in our climate-controlled, artificially lit modern world. The bathroom facilities in these elevated structures deserve special mention because they represent some of the most creative problem-solving in modern architecture. How do you handle waste disposal when you're hundreds of feet off the ground and surrounded by pristine forest? Some solutions are surprisingly elegant, like composting toilets that turn human waste into fertilizer for the very trees supporting the structure. Others incorporate grey water systems that filter shower and sink water through constructed wetlands before returning it to the forest floor. The most luxurious treehouse skyscrapers feature full bathrooms with heated floors, rainfall showers, and even soaking tubs, positioned to offer stunning views through floor-to-ceiling windows. Imagine sinking into hot water while watching the sun set through the forest canopy. Steam from your bath mingling with the mist rising from the trees. It's an experience that redefines what luxury means, shifting the focus from expensive materials and brand names to the priceless feeling of connection with something larger than yourself. Dining in these elevated rooms presents its own unique challenges and opportunities. Most treehouse hotels provide meals prepared at ground level and transported up via pulley systems or dumbwaiters, turning every meal into a small adventure. But the real magic happens when you eat surrounded by the sounds and smells of the living forest. Breakfast tastes different when accompanied by the dawn chorus of songbirds. Dinner becomes a meditation when your only light comes from candles flickering in rhythm with the breeze moving through the branches. Some of the more elaborate treehouse skyscrapers include full kitchens, allowing guests to prepare their own meals while hundreds of feet off the ground. There's something primal and satisfying about cooking with fire when you're surrounded by trees, even if that fire comes from a modern gas stove. The aromas of your meal mix with the forest scents drifting through open windows, creating a sensory experience that ground-based restaurants can't replicate. The social dynamics of these elevated spaces are fascinating to observe. Couples often report feeling more connected to each other when sharing such an intimate space suspended in the wilderness. The absence of televisions, reliable internet, and other distractions forces conversation and genuine interaction. But it's not just romantic couples who benefit from this enforced intimacy. Families discover new ways to relate to each other when their usual entertainment options are replaced by the endless fascination of forest life. Children seem particularly well suited to treehouse living, quickly adapting to the elevated environment in ways that often surprise their parents. They develop an intuitive understanding of the tree's movements and moods, learning to read the subtle signs that predict weather changes or the arrival of different animals. Many parents report that their children sleep better in tree houses than they do at home, perhaps because the gentle swaying motion taps into some deep memory of being rocked to sleep. The design philosophy behind these structures represents a radical departure from traditional architecture. Instead of imposing human ideas of space and form onto the landscape, treehouse skyscrapers must negotiate with their living foundations. Every design decision becomes a conversation between human needs and tree biology. Where can you attach support beams without damaging the bark? How do you route electrical wiring around growing branches? What happens to your carefully planned layout when the tree grows 6 inches in an unexpected direction? This collaborative approach to building creates structures that feel organic in ways that conventionally constructed buildings never can. Rooms curve around natural obstacles, hallways follow the branching patterns of their host trees, and windows frame views that change with the seasons as the canopy grows and shifts. The result is architecture that feels alive, spaces that breathe and change and respond to the rhythms of the natural world. The lighting in these elevated bedrooms deserves special attention because it represents one of the most crucial elements in creating the proper atmosphere for tree-dwelling humans. Too much artificial light destroys the connection with natural cycles that makes the experience so transformative. Too little, and you can't safely navigate the space after dark. The best treehouse designers have mastered the art of providing just enough illumination to ensure safety and comfort while preserving the mysterious magical quality that comes from sleeping among the branches. LED strips hidden along handrails provide pathway lighting that won't disturb your night vision or attract insects. Dimmable reading lights positioned near the bed can be adjusted to match your circadian rhythms, gradually dimming as bedtime approaches to help your body prepare for sleep. Some installations even include colored lighting that changes throughout the evening, shifting from warm daylight tones to the deep reds and oranges that promote melatonin production. The most sophisticated systems respond to the forest's own lighting cues, brightening when clouds pass over the sun and dimming when moonlight filters through the leaves. It's technology in service of nature rather than dominating it, creating an environment where your body can rediscover the rhythms that governed human sleep for thousands of years, before electric lighting rewired our brains. The psychological effects of sleeping at such heights go far beyond mere novelty. There's something deeply transformative about voluntarily placing yourself in a position that every ancient instinct tells you is dangerous. Your lizard brain screams warnings about falling, about exposure, about being separated from the safety of solid ground. But as night settles over the forest and you find yourself not just surviving but thriving in this elevated sanctuary, those primal fears transform into something like triumph. You begin to understand why our ancestors built their homes in trees, why elevated sleeping platforms appear in cultures around the world, from the Korowai tree houses of Papua New Guinea to the elevated granaries of medieval Europe. There's protection up here, not just from ground-dwelling predators, but from the crushing weight of earthbound thinking. Your problems don't disappear when you climb into the canopy, but they shrink to proper proportions when viewed from hundreds of feet above the ordinary world. The construction materials used in these aerial bedrooms tell their own fascinating story. Traditional lumber would be far too heavy for the delicate engineering required to suspend a comfortable living space in tree branches without damaging the host. Instead, builders rely on advanced composites, aluminum alloys, and carbon fiber components that provide maximum strength with minimal weight. The result is structures that feel substantial and secure while remaining light enough for even mature trees to support without stress. But it's not just about weight. Every material choice must consider how it will interact with the living tree over decades of growth and seasonal change. Wood expands and contracts with humidity changes. Metal corrodes in the constant moisture of forest environments. Plastics become brittle under UV exposure filtered through shifting leaves. The most successful treehouse skyscrapers use materials that age gracefully alongside their host trees, developing patina and character that enhances rather than detracts from the natural setting. Some builders have begun experimenting with living materials, incorporating moss and lichen directly into the structure's surfaces to create walls that blur the line between building and forest. These biological components don't just provide insulation and humidity control, they create micro-ecosystems that support insects, small birds, and other creatures that might otherwise be displaced by human construction. Your bedroom becomes part of the forest's web of life, rather than an intrusion into it. The ventilation systems in these elevated structures represent masterpieces of passive environmental control. Without the option of running extensive ductwork through tree branches, designers must work with natural air currents to keep interiors comfortable year-round. Strategic placement of windows and vents creates convection currents that draw cool air up from the forest floor, while allowing warm air to escape through the canopy. The result is natural climate control that uses zero electricity while providing better air quality than most ground-based buildings. During summer months, the forest canopy creates its own cooling system through a process called transpiration. Trees release water vapor through their leaves, creating a natural air conditioning effect that can lower ambient temperatures by 10 or 15 degrees compared to open areas. Your treehouse bedroom becomes the beneficiary of this biological climate control, staying remarkably cool even during heat waves, while maintaining the humidity levels that keep your skin and respiratory system comfortable. Winter brings different challenges, but equally elegant solutions. The thermal mass of the tree trunk helps moderate temperature swings, staying warmer than the air during cold snaps and cooler during unseasonable warm spells. Some treehouse designers incorporate small wood-burning stoves that provide both heat and the hypnotic comfort of flickering flames. The chimneys must be carefully designed to prevent forest fires, with spark arresters and heat shields that protect surrounding branches, while safely venting combustion gases above the canopy. The plumbing in these aerial sanctuaries requires creative engineering that would impress any mechanical contractor. Water must be pumped up hundreds of feet, often through systems that snake around living branches that grow and move over time. Grey water and black water must be managed without contaminating the forest environment below. Some installations use vacuum toilet systems borrowed from aircraft technology, while others employ biological treatment systems that actually improve soil conditions around the host tree. Hot water presents its own unique challenges. Solar collectors can be integrated into platform surfaces or mounted on south-facing branches, but they must be positioned to avoid shading the tree's photosynthetic surfaces. Some systems use on-demand tankless heaters that minimize energy consumption, while providing endless hot water for those long soaks in elevated bathtubs. Others incorporate heat exchangers that capture warmth from grey water to preheat incoming fresh water, maximizing efficiency in an environment where every watt of power must be carefully managed. The communication systems in these remote treehouse hotels often rely on satellite internet and cellular boosters to provide connectivity for guests who can't completely disconnect from the modern world. But the most successful installations make this technology as unobtrusive as possible, hiding antennas among branches and using directional systems that minimize visual impact while maximizing signal strength. Many guests find themselves using their devices less and less as the forest works its magic, trading screen time for sky time. Emergency preparedness takes on new dimensions when your bedroom is suspended hundreds of feet off the ground. Fire suppression systems must protect both the structure and its host tree without using chemicals that could damage the forest ecosystem. Many installations rely on misting systems that can quickly saturate the area with water, while using minimal quantities of this precious resource. Others incorporate fire-resistant materials and escape routes that allow rapid evacuation if conditions become dangerous. Weather monitoring becomes crucial when you're living at canopy level, exposed to conditions that ground dwellers rarely experience. Wind speeds can be dramatically higher in the treetops, and lightning poses risks that simply don't exist in conventional buildings. The most sophisticated treehouse skyscrapers include weather stations that provide real-time data on temperature, humidity, wind speed, and atmospheric pressure, allowing guests to make informed decisions about outdoor activities and safety precautions. The wildlife encounters possible from these elevated vantage points are simply impossible to replicate at ground level. You might find yourself sharing breakfast with a family of squirrels who've decided your platform makes an excellent highway. Hawks and eagles often perch on nearby branches, seeming as curious about you as you are about them. During migration seasons, your bedroom becomes a front-row seat to one of nature's greatest spectacles, as countless birds navigate by landmarks visible only from the treetops. Nocturnal visitors bring their own magic to the treehouse experience. Owls hunt from perches just outside your windows, their silent flight a masterclass in biological engineering. Flying squirrels glide between trees like furry little superheroes, their membrane wings catching moonlight as they navigate the three-dimensional highway of the forest canopy. Bats swoop and dive after insects, their echolocation calls creating an ultrasonic symphony that speaks to senses you didn't know you possessed. The seasonal changes visible from these elevated bedrooms unfold like a time-lapse movie life. Spring arrives of forest first in the canopy, where warming air temperatures trigger bud break weeks before ground-level plants respond to lengthening days. You watch leaves unfurl in fast forward, transforming bare branches into a green cathedral that filters sunlight into constantly shifting patterns. The air fills with pollen and the sweet scent of tree flowers, while bird songs reach a crescendo as breeding season begins in earnest. Summer transforms your aerial bedroom into a green cocoon, surrounded by the full glory of the forest in its prime growing season. The canopy becomes so dense that you can barely see the ground below, creating a sense of floating in a sea of leaves. Temperatures remain remarkably stable, cooler than the forest floor during hot days and warmer during cool nights, as the thermal mass of all that vegetation moderates temperature swings. Autumn brings the most spectacular show of all, as your treehouse becomes the center of a three-dimensional display of changing colors that ground-based observers can only glimpse from below. You're surrounded by the transformation, living inside the color change as chlorophyll breaks down and reveals the hidden pigments that have been there all along. The sound of falling leaves creates a constant, gentle percussion, while the smell of decomposition rises from below, rich and earthy and full of promise for next year's growth. Winter strips away all pretense, revealing the essential architecture of both tree and treehouse in stark clarity. Snow accumulates on every horizontal surface, outlining beams and branches in white, while transforming the forest into a crystalline wonderland. The bare branches create intricate patterns against grey skies, while ice forms fantastic sculptures that change with every weather system. It's a time of stark beauty, when the engineering marvel of suspending a comfortable bedroom hundreds of feet above the ground becomes most apparent. The maintenance requirements for these elevated structures present unique challenges that most building owners never face. How do you repair a roof when it's accessible only by climbing through tree branches? What happens when a storm damages siding that's hundreds of feet off the ground? The most successful treehouse operators develop specialized equipment and techniques for maintaining their aerial properties, often working with arborists and rope access technicians who treat the structures like particularly complex tree maintenance projects. Cleaning presents its own set of challenges when your housekeeping staff must climb trees to reach work areas. Windows that collect pollen, leaves, and bird droppings require regular attention, but accessing them safely requires specialized equipment and training. Some installations incorporate self-cleaning glass coatings that reduce maintenance requirements, while others design window placement to minimize exposure to the elements while maximizing views. The insurance considerations for treehouse skyscrapers represent a fascinating intersection of traditional property coverage and specialized risk assessment. How do you evaluate the structural integrity of a building whose foundation grows and changes over time? What happens to your coverage if the host tree becomes diseased or damaged? The most reputable installations work with specialized insurers who understand the unique risks and benefits of tree-based architecture, developing policies that protect both guests and operators, while recognizing the inherently different risk profile of elevated structures. Professional inspections require certified arborists working alongside structural engineers to evaluate both the health of the host tree and the integrity of the attached structure. These assessments consider factors that never apply to conventional buildings, like the tree's response to pruning, its susceptibility to specific diseases, and its likely growth patterns over the next decade. The reports read like a fascinating hybrid of medical charts and engineering specifications, documenting the vital signs of living architecture. The booking process for these extraordinary accommodations often requires advanced planning measured in months rather than days. The most desirable treehouse skyscrapers maintain waiting lists that stretch through multiple seasons, with prime dates like autumn color peak and summer solstice reserving years in advance. But the exclusivity only adds to the anticipation, building excitement for an experience that simply cannot be rushed or replicated. Many properties offer different seasons and weather conditions at varying rates, recognizing that some guests prefer the cozy isolation of winter storms, while others seek the vibrant energy of spring emergence. The pricing reflects not just the luxury accommodations, but the years of planning and construction required to create these aerial sanctuaries, plus the ongoing costs of maintaining structures that must weather every storm while protecting their living foundations. The psychological preparation for sleeping in a treehouse skyscraper often begins weeks before arrival, as guests contemplate the unique challenges and rewards of elevated accommodation. Some report anxiety about heights that they've never confronted before, while others worry about their ability to sleep while suspended so far above solid ground. But nearly all discover that their fears transform into wonder once they experience the profound peace that comes from resting among the branches. The departure process can be surprisingly emotional, as guests find themselves reluctant to return to ground-based living after experiencing the expanded perspective that comes from sleeping in the trees. Many report feeling claustrophobic in conventional hotel rooms after spending nights surrounded by open sky and endless forest views. The trees that initially seemed like exotic vacation destinations begin to feel like home in ways that traditional accommodations never could. The dreams that occur in these elevated bedrooms consistently surprise guests with their vividness and connection to the natural world, without the electromagnetic interference of urban environments, with air purified by thousands of trees, and with the gentle rocking motion that mimics the womb. Sleep takes on a quality that many haven't experienced since childhood. People report dreaming in colors they've never seen, or having conversations with animals that somehow make perfect sense in the context of their forest setting. The photography opportunities from these aerial vantage points attract professional and amateur photographers alike, drawn by perspectives impossible to achieve from ground level. Sunrise and sunset take on new meaning when viewed through the forest canopy, with light filtering through leaves in constantly changing patterns. Storm photography becomes an exercise in controlled danger, capturing lightning illuminating the forest from within while remaining safely sheltered in your elevated refuge. The writing and creative work that emerges from stays in these treehouse skyscrapers often surprises guests with its depth and originality. Something about the elevated perspective, the constant gentle motion, and the immersion in natural rhythms seems to unlock creative channels that remain closed in conventional environments. Authors report breakthrough moments in long-stalled projects, while artists discover new ways of seeing that transform their work long after they return to ground-based studios. But perhaps the most profound impact of sleeping in these treehouse skyscrapers is the way they change your relationship with the built environment forever. After experiencing architecture that works with natural systems rather than dominating them, conventional buildings begin to feel crude and disconnected. You start noticing the absence of natural light, the staleness of mechanically circulated air, and the psychological weight of being cut off from the living world. The memory of waking up surrounded by forest, of falling asleep to the whispered conversations of trees, becomes a touchstone for what human habitation could be if we learn to build with nature rather than against it. These treehouse skyscrapers aren't just luxury accommodations. They're glimpses of a future where human shelter enhances rather than destroys the ecosystems that support all life on Earth. As you lie in your elevated bed tonight, wherever that might be, imagine the gentle sway of branches in the wind, the soft rustle of leaves overhead, and the profound peace that comes from sleeping among the clouds while cradled in the arms of giants that have stood sentinel over the forest for centuries beyond counting. The morning after your first night in a treehouse skyscraper brings revelations that ground-based hotels simply cannot provide. You wake not to the jarring buzz of an alarm clock, but to the forest itself stirring to life around you. The transition from sleep to consciousness feels gradual, organic, as if you're emerging from the same dream that's been nurturing the trees throughout the night. Your body feels different too, more aligned with natural rhythms that have been dormant for years under layers of artificial lighting and climate control. The air quality at canopy level is unlike anything most people have ever breathed. While ground-level air contains all the usual pollutants and allergens, the atmosphere hundreds of feet up has been filtered through millions of leaves, each one acting as a biological air purifier. The oxygen content is noticeably higher, while dust particles and urban contaminants have been left far below. Many guests report feeling more energetic and clear-headed than they have in years, as if their cells are finally getting the fuel they've been craving. The shower experience in these elevated bathrooms deserves its own poetry. Imagine standing under a rainfall showerhead while actual rain patters on the canopy above, the two water sources creating a symphony of percussion that transforms routine hygiene into a ritual of connection with the water cycle itself. Some installations feature outdoor shower areas on protected platforms where you can cleanse yourself while surrounded by nothing but sky and leaves. Steam from the hot water mingling with morning mist rising from the forest floor. The water pressure at such heights requires ingenious engineering solutions. Pump systems must work against gravity to deliver adequate flow, while remaining quiet enough not to disturb the forest's natural soundscape. Some properties use gravity-fed systems with elevated storage tanks cleverly disguised as tree houses themselves, while others employ variable speed pumps that adjust automatically to demand, ensuring consistent pressure whether you're washing your hands or filling a soaking tub. The breakfast delivery systems in these aerial hotels represent logistical challenges that would make any supply chain manager proud. How do you transport fresh croissants and hot coffee 500 feet up into the trees without spillage, cooling, or crushing? Some properties employ pulley systems operated by ground crews, while others use small electric lifts that climb guide cables strung between platforms. The most elegant solutions incorporate dumbwaiters built into the tree trunks themselves, with mechanical systems that work around the living wood without damaging it. But the real magic happens when you eat that breakfast, surrounded by the morning activities of forest dwellers who've accepted your presence as part of their landscape. Squirrels may investigate your table settings with the bold curiosity of seasoned hotel inspectors. Birds might perch on nearby branches, cocking their heads to study this strange creature who's chosen to dine in their dining room. The coffee tastes different when accompanied by the liquid notes of a wood thrush, and toast becomes transcendent when buttered while watching sunbeams paint golden columns through the morning mist. The daily rhythms of treehouse living follow patterns that urban dwellers have forgotten existed. Without artificial lighting to extend the day indefinitely, you find yourself naturally winding down as darkness approaches. The absence of blue light from screens allows your melatonin production to follow its ancient schedule, triggered by the dimming of natural light, rather than the arbitrary decision to close a laptop. Sleep comes more easily and feels more restorative, as if your body is finally allowed to remember how rest is supposed to work. The social media impact of staying in these elevated sanctuaries presents interesting contradictions. While the visual opportunities are extraordinary, many guests find themselves posting less frequently than they anticipated. The profound peace of the forest environment makes the usual compulsion to document and share feel somehow inappropriate. Many discover that they prefer to experience these moments fully, rather than viewing them through the lens of how they'll appear to others online. The children who visit these treehouse skyscrapers often adapt more quickly than their parents, displaying an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional living that surprises adults. Kids seem to grasp instinctively how to move safely in elevated environments, reading the subtle cues that indicate which branches are stable and which platforms can support their weight. They develop games that utilize the unique geometry of tree-based architecture, turning support cables into jungle gyms and using the natural acoustics of the canopy to play elaborate versions of hide and seek. The educational opportunities presented by these elevated classrooms are extraordinary. Biology lessons take on new meaning when conducted at eye level with bird nests and squirrel highways. Physics becomes tangible as children feel the tree's response to wind loads and observe how the structure distributes weight through living supports. Mathematics appears in the spiral patterns of bark, the geometric arrangements of leaves, and the engineering calculations required to suspend tons of building materials in living architecture. The therapeutic applications of treehouse living are beginning to attract attention from medical professionals and mental health practitioners. The combination of elevation, natural surroundings, and gentle motion appears to have measurable effects on stress hormones, blood pressure, and sleep quality. Some facilities are beginning to offer specialized programs for individuals recovering from trauma, burnout, or addiction, recognizing that the forest canopy provides a form of healing that conventional therapy settings cannot match. The seasonal worker communities that maintain these treehouse skyscrapers develop unique skills and perspectives that set them apart from traditional hospitality employees. They must be part arborist, part construction worker, part concierge, and part wilderness guide. Their daily commute involves climbing hundreds of feet into the air, and their office views change with every storm and season. Many report that working in the trees has fundamentally altered their relationship with nature and given them a deep appreciation for the complexity of forest ecosystems. The supply chains that support these remote elevated accommodations require careful planning and creative solutions. Every item, from fresh linens to emergency medical supplies, must be transported up through tree branches or lifted by specialized equipment. Perishable goods present particular challenges, requiring insulated containers and climate control systems that can function reliably in forest environments. Some properties maintain their own weather stations to predict delivery windows when wind conditions won't interfere with crane operations or cable systems. The waste management systems in treehouse hotels represent some of the most innovative approaches to sustainable living. Organic waste can be composted on site, creating fertilizer for the very trees that support the structures. Recyclable materials must be sorted and transported down for processing, while non-recyclable waste is minimized through careful selection of supplies and packaging. Some installations have achieved near zero waste status by designing closed-loop systems where every input has a planned output that benefits the forest ecosystem. The energy independence achieved by many treehouse skyscrapers demonstrates the potential for off-grid luxury that doesn't sacrifice comfort for sustainability. Solar panel arrays can be integrated into platform surfaces or mounted on south-facing clearings without disrupting the forest canopy. Battery storage systems provide power throughout the night and during cloudy periods, while backup generators ensure guest safety during extended weather events. Some installations even generate surplus power that's fed back into regional grids, making these elevated hotels net energy contributors rather than consumers. The water independence of these structures often surprises guests accustomed to unlimited municipal supplies. Rainwater collection systems can provide all the fresh water needed for drinking, cooking, and bathing, with sophisticated filtration, ensuring quality that often exceeds city tap water. Grey water recycling systems process shower and sink drainage through constructed wetlands that actually improve local water quality. Some properties achieve complete water independence, taking nothing from municipal sources and returning cleaner water to the forest ecosystem than what they collect. The acoustic environment of treehouse bedrooms reveals layers of forest communication that ground-based observers rarely detect. The canopy acts as a natural amphitheatre, amplifying and focusing sounds from different elevations and distances. You begin to distinguish between the territorial calls of different bird species, the warning chatter of squirrels announcing your presence, and the subtle creaking communications between trees as they respond to changing wind patterns. Some guests report developing an almost supernatural ability to predict weather changes based on shifts in the forest's acoustic patterns. The thermal dynamics of tree-based architecture create microclimates that remain comfortable across a surprising range of weather conditions. The thermal mass of living wood moderates temperature swings, while the transpiration of leaves provides natural evaporative cooling during hot weather. The insulating properties of bark and the windbreak effect of surrounding canopy combine to create environments that require minimal artificial climate control. Some guests are amazed to discover they're comfortable in their elevated bedrooms wearing only light clothing, while ground temperatures would require heavy jackets. The lighting design in successful treehouse installations represents a masterclass in working with rather than against natural illumination patterns. Carefully placed mirrors can redirect morning sunlight deep into interior spaces, while skylights positioned to avoid damaging tree growth provide natural illumination without artificial energy consumption. Evening lighting systems often incorporate fiber optics and LED strips that provide necessary safety illumination while preserving the dark sky conditions that make stargazing and wildlife observation possible. The fire safety protocols in these elevated structures require extensive planning and specialized equipment. Sprinkler systems must be designed to protect both the building and its host tree without using chemicals that could harm the forest ecosystem. Evacuation routes often include zip lines or rappelling equipment that allow rapid descent, even when stairways are compromised. Fire suppression systems may incorporate misting technology that can quickly saturate danger areas while using minimal water resources. The construction crews that build these treehouse skyscrapers develop skills that bridge traditional carpentry with advanced rigging techniques. Every piece of material must be lifted into position without damaging tree branches, requiring crane operators with the precision of surgeons and ground crews who understand both engineering principles and tree biology. The work schedules often depend on seasonal growth patterns, with major construction phases timed to avoid disrupting critical periods in the host tree's annual cycle. The insurance and liability considerations for treehouse accommodations involve risk assessments that don't exist for conventional buildings. Actuaries must evaluate the structural integrity of living foundations that grow and change over time, while safety inspectors need expertise in both building codes and tree biology. Emergency response protocols must account for the challenges of accessing elevated locations, while guest safety briefings cover hazards that simply don't exist at ground level. The long-term sustainability of treehouse tourism depends on maintaining the health of host trees and surrounding forest ecosystems. Regular monitoring by certified arborists ensures that structures aren't interfering with normal growth patterns or creating stress that could compromise tree health. Some installations contribute to forest research by hosting scientific studies on canopy ecosystems, tree physiology, and the effects of human presence on wildlife behavior. The cultural impact of treehouse skyscrapers extends beyond their immediate guests to influence architectural thinking and environmental consciousness. These structures demonstrate that luxury and sustainability can coexist, that human comfort doesn't require destruction of natural systems. They serve as proving grounds for technologies and design approaches that may eventually influence mainstream construction, from passive climate control to integrated renewable energy systems. The psychological research conducted in these elevated environments reveals fascinating insights into human responses to height, motion, and immersion in natural settings. Studies suggest that sleeping at canopy level may trigger ancient genetic memories of our arboreal ancestors, activating neural pathways that remain dormant in ground-based living. The gentle swaying motion appears to stimulate the vestibular system in ways that promote deeper sleep and more vivid dreams. The artistic communities that develop around these installations often produce work that reflects their elevated perspective in unexpected ways. Painters discover new approaches to depicting light and shadow, while musicians compose pieces inspired by the complex acoustic environments of the forest canopy. Writers find that the altered perspective of treehouse living influences not just their subject matter, but their entire approach to storytelling, creating narratives that soar and dip like the branches that cradle their temporary homes. The relationship between treehouse guests and the seasonal rhythms of their forest hosts creates a form of environmental education that no textbook could provide. You learn to read the subtle signs that predict weather changes, from the behavior of insects to the way leaves orient themselves in response to barometric pressure. The forest becomes a three-dimensional classroom where every phenomenon connects to larger ecological principles. The maintenance schedules for these elevated structures must accommodate both human needs and forest cycles. Exterior work is often planned around bird nesting seasons to avoid disturbing wildlife, while major repairs may be delayed until after leaf fall to provide better access to structural elements. The staff develops an intimate knowledge of their forest environment, able to predict which storms will require immediate post-weather inspections and which seasons present the greatest challenges for different types of maintenance work. The guest departure process often becomes unexpectedly emotional as visitors realize they must return to ground-based living after experiencing the expanded perspective that comes from sleeping among the trees. Many report feeling claustrophobic in conventional accommodations after nights spent surrounded by open sky and endless forest views. The memory of waking up in the canopy becomes a touchstone for what human habitation could be if we learn to build in partnership with, rather than in opposition to, natural systems. The waiting lists for the most desirable treehouse skyscrapers often stretch for years, with returning guests booking their next stays before departing from their current visits. The exclusivity isn't artificial scarcity, but reflects the genuine limitations of forest environments that can only support a small number of elevated structures without compromising ecosystem health. This scarcity adds to the preciousness of the experience, creating anticipation that builds for months before arrival. The weather monitoring systems in these exposed locations provide real-time data that influences everything from daily activity planning to emergency evacuation decisions. Anemometers measure wind speeds at canopy level, which can be dramatically different from ground-based readings. Lightning detection systems provide early warnings of electrical storm activity that poses particular risks to elevated metal structures. Barometric pressure sensors help predict sudden weather changes that could affect guest safety or comfort. The food storage and preparation challenges in these elevated kitchens require creative solutions that would impress any restaurant manager. Refrigeration systems must operate efficiently at heights, while remaining quiet enough not to disturb the forest environment. Pantry storage must account for the possibility of curious wildlife investigating food supplies, while cooking ventilation systems must disperse aromas and smoke without creating fire hazards in the surrounding canopy. The communication systems that connect these remote installations to emergency services and the outside world often rely on satellite technology and cellular boosters to provide reliable connectivity. But the most successful properties make this technology as unobtrusive as possible, hiding antennas among branches and using directional equipment that minimizes visual impact while maximizing signal strength. Many guests find themselves grateful for the limited connectivity, discovering that partial disconnection from digital networks enhances their connection to natural systems. As you prepare for your own eventual descent from whatever treehouse skyscraper you might be fortunate enough to experience, remember that the real value of these elevated sanctuaries isn't just the novelty of sleeping hundreds of feet off the ground. It's the way they reconnect us to rhythms and perspectives that human beings knew intimately for millions of years before we convinced ourselves that solid ground and artificial light were all we needed for happiness. In these aerial bedrooms, suspended between earth and sky, we remember what we gave up when we stopped looking up, stopped listening to the wind, and stopped dreaming of flying. The booking confirmations for these extraordinary accommodations arrive like invitations to another world, often accompanied by detailed preparation guides that read more like expedition briefings than hotel instructions. Guests are advised on everything from appropriate clothing for variable canopy temperatures to the psychological preparation needed for sleeping at such dramatic heights. Some properties even include meditation exercises designed to help acclimate your nervous system to the unique sensory environment of elevated forest living. The arrival experience at these treehouse destinations typically begins with a ground-level orientation that feels part safety briefing, part spiritual preparation. Guides explain not just the mechanical systems and emergency procedures, but the etiquette of living temporarily among creatures who consider these branches their permanent highways. You learn which sounds indicate normal forest activity and which might suggest something requiring attention. The weight limits, movement protocols, and weather contingencies are covered with the thoroughness of airline safety demonstrations, but delivered with the reverence of monastery rules. The ascent to your aerial accommodation becomes a ritual of transition, each step up the spiral staircase or cable lift carrying you further from the familiar rhythms of terrestrial living. Your ears pop from the altitude change, not because you're climbing mountains, but because the acoustic environment shifts so dramatically between forest floor and canopy level. The temperature drops slightly as you rise through different thermal layers, while the quality of light changes from the filtered green of understory to the golden brilliance of direct canopy illumination. The moment you first step onto your elevated platform, something fundamental shifts in your relationship with gravity. The slight give in the flooring, the nearly imperceptible sway that reminds you you're standing on a living foundation, triggers responses buried deep in human DNA. Your balance systems recalibrate automatically, engaging stabilizer muscles that have been dormant since childhood tree climbing adventures. Within minutes, most guests report feeling not anxious about the height, but exhilarated by the liberation from ground-based limitations. The unpacking process in these elevated chambers takes on ceremonial significance as you arrange your belongings in spaces that exist nowhere else on Earth. Your clothes hang in closets that sway gently with the wind, while your toiletries line shelves that flex subtly with the tree's natural movements. Every possession must be secured against the possibility of falling through gaps in the flooring to the forest floor hundreds of feet below, turning routine organization into an exercise in three-dimensional thinking. The first meal prepared in your treehouse kitchen becomes an adventure in elevated cooking, where every ingredient must be treated with respect for the journey it took to reach your aerial pantry. The gas flames of your stove burn differently at this altitude, requiring adjustments to cooking times and techniques. The herbs growing in window boxes taste more intense, perhaps because they're receiving unfiltered sunlight and unpolluted air. Or maybe because harvesting them while suspended in the forest canopy adds reverence to routine seasoning. The afternoon nap experience in these elevated bedrooms transcends ordinary rest, becoming something closer to meditation or time travel. The gentle rocking motion that initially feels strange begins to feel like the most natural thing in the world, as if human beings were always meant to sleep in motion rather than on static surfaces. The white noise of wind through leaves creates a sound environment so complex and layered that your brain stops trying to analyze individual components and simply accepts the forest symphony as the perfect background for deep relaxation. The evening cocktail hour takes on new meaning when your bar is suspended hundreds of feet above the forest floor, with views that stretch to horizons invisible from ground level. The ice in your glass chimes differently in the thin canopy air, while the alcohol seems to hit your system more quickly, though whether from altitude effects or the pure oxygen-rich environment remains deliciously uncertain. Toasting the sunset from your aerial perch feels like participating in an ancient ritual, connecting you to every human who ever climbed high, seeking perspective and transcendence. The dinner preparations in these elevated kitchens require planning that ground-based cooking never demands. Every utensil, every ingredient, every plate must be accounted for before you begin, because dropping something means it's gone forever, contributing to forest floor compost hundreds of feet below. The herbs you snip from window box gardens taste like they've been concentrated by altitude and proximity to sky, while the wine seems to pair better with forest air than any sommelier could have predicted. The after-dinner entertainment options in Treehouse Skyscrapers lean heavily toward activities that simply don't exist at ground level. Stargazing becomes a full immersion experience when your bedroom ceiling opens to reveal unpolluted skies framed by swaying branches. The Milky Way appears with clarity that urban dwellers have never witnessed, while meteor showers become personal performances staged just outside your windows. Some installations include telescope mounts that track celestial objects automatically, turning your treehouse into a private observatory suspended in the forest canopy. The nighttime bathroom visits that might seem daunting in such elevated locations actually become opportunities for midnight wildlife observation. The forest comes alive after dark, with creatures that remain hidden during daylight hours, and your elevated vantage point provides front row seats to nocturnal dramas playing out in 3 dimensions around you. Flying squirrels glide between trees like furry superheroes, while owls conduct their silent hunts with precision that makes human technology seem crude by comparison. The reading experience in these aerial libraries transforms literature in unexpected ways. Books about adventure feel more immediate when you're living your own elevated adventure, while nature writing takes on new layers of meaning when you can look up from the page to observe the phenomena being described. The natural lighting that filters through the canopy changes throughout the day, creating reading conditions that shift from the green-tinted illumination of morning to the golden warmth of afternoon to the silver mystery of moonlight through leaves. The morning coffee ritual in your treehouse kitchen becomes a meditation on the journey that brought those beans to your elevated sanctuary. The aroma seems to carry farther in the thin forest air, attracting curious birds who perch nearby as if hoping for an invitation to your breakfast table. The first sip tastes different at this altitude, whether from the pure air, the reduced atmospheric pressure, or simply the psychological enhancement that comes from drinking coffee while suspended among the clouds. The shower experiences in these elevated bathrooms redefine the relationship between bathing and nature. Steam from your hot water mingles with morning mist rising from the forest floor, creating atmospheric effects that no spa could replicate. The sound of water cascading from your showerhead harmonizes with the dripping of condensation from leaves above, turning routine hygiene into a symphony of water in all its forms. Some installations feature outdoor shower areas where you can cleanse yourself while surrounded by nothing but sky and forest. achieving a level of connection with the elements that ground-based bathing simply cannot provide. The laundry facilities in these remote locations require creative solutions that would challenge any domestic engineer. Clotheslines strung between platforms allow your garments to dry in pure forest air, while swaying gently in breezes that have been filtered through miles of leaves. Your clothes emerge from this process smelling of pine, cedar, and oxygen, carrying the scent of the forest long after you've returned to ground-based living. Some guests report that clothing dried in treehouse environments retains a freshness that conventional dryers cannot match. The waste disposal systems in these elevated accommodations demonstrate that luxury and environmental responsibility can coexist beautifully. Composting toilets transform human waste into fertilizer for the very trees that support your temporary home, completing biological cycles that connect you intimately to the forest ecosystem. Grey water from sinks and showers is processed through constructed wetlands that actually improve local water quality, ensuring that your presence enhances rather than degrades the natural environment. The communication with ground-based support staff requires protocols that don't exist in conventional accommodations. Emergency procedures involve signal systems that can be seen or heard across vertical distances that would challenge normal hospitality operations. Some properties maintain intercom systems that allow discreet communication between elevated guests and ground crews, while others rely on satellite phones or cellular boosters to maintain connectivity with the outside world when needed. The seasonal transitions visible from these elevated vantage points unfold with dramatic clarity that ground-based observers can only imagine. Spring arrives first in the canopy, where warming air temperatures trigger bud break weeks before understory plants detect changing conditions. You witness the forest awakening from your front row seat, watching leaves unfurl and flowers bloom in fast forward as the forest transforms from winter's stark architecture to spring's explosive growth. The storm experiences from these elevated positions provide visceral education in meteorology that no classroom could replicate. You feel barometric pressure changes in your inner ear as weather systems approach, while wind patterns become visible through the movement of branches at different elevations. Lightning illuminates the canopy from within, creating brief moments when every leaf becomes a stained glass window backlit by electrical discharge. The thunder that follows seems to originate from all directions at once, as sound waves bounce and echo through the three-dimensional architecture of the forest. The wildlife photography opportunities from these elevated blinds attract professionals who understand that perspectives this unique cannot be replicated with telephoto lenses from the ground. You're at eye level with creatures that rarely interact with humans, capturing images of natural behaviors that remain hidden from terrestrial observers. The morning light filtering through the canopy creates constantly changing conditions that challenge photographers to adapt their techniques to illumination patterns that shift minute by minute as the sun moves across the sky. The writing and creative work that emerges from stays in these elevated studios often surprises guests with its depth and originality. Something about the swaying motion, the pure air, and the three-dimensional thinking required for treehouse living seems to unlock creative channels that remain blocked in conventional environments. Authors report breakthrough moments in stalled projects, while artists discover new approaches to their work that persist long after returning to ground-based studios. The departure process from these treehouse sanctuaries often becomes unexpectedly emotional as guests confront the reality of returning to horizontal living. The elevator or staircase descent feels like traveling backward through evolutionary time, surrendering the expanded perspective that comes from sleeping among the clouds in favor of the safe but limited viewpoint of ground-based existence. Many guests linger on the final platform, reluctant to complete their descent, trying to memorize the feeling of being suspended between earth and sky. The drive away from these forest installations provides dramatic perspective on the experience you're leaving behind. Looking back at the canopy that concealed your elevated refuge, you strain to catch glimpses of the platforms and walkways that were your home for precious days or weeks. The trees that seemed so accessible when you were living among them now appear impossibly tall and remote, making you question whether the whole experience might have been an elaborate dream. The integration back into conventional accommodations reveals how profoundly the treehouse experience has altered your relationship with built environments. Hotel rooms feel claustrophobic after nights spent surrounded by open sky, while the absence of natural movement makes standard beds seem dead and lifeless. The mechanical hum of air conditioning systems becomes intrusive after weeks of falling asleep to wind songs through leaves, while artificial lighting appears harsh and unnatural compared to the ever-changing illumination of forest canopy. The long-term effects of treehouse living continue to influence guests months and years after their elevated adventures end. Many report fundamental changes in their sleep patterns, finding themselves naturally drowsy at sunset and fully alert at dawn without need for alarm clocks. The enhanced appreciation for natural environments persists, making urban parks and suburban gardens more fascinating as guests recognize ecological relationships they never noticed before their canopy education. The photographic memories captured during these elevated stays take on significance beyond typical vacation documentation. Images of sunrise through forest canopy or storm clouds viewed from treehouse windows become touchstones for a way of living that most humans never experience. These photographs serve not just as mementos, but as proof that an alternative relationship with the natural world remains possible, that human habitation doesn't require domination of natural systems. The stories shared by treehouse veterans take on mythic qualities as they attempt to convey experiences that have no equivalent in ground-based living. Descriptions of falling asleep while swaying gently in the arms of ancient trees sound fantastical to listeners who've never ventured above the forest floor. Yet the specific details, the technical explanations of engineering marvels, and the profound peace described by multiple independent sources gradually convince skeptics that these aerial sanctuaries represent real alternatives to conventional accommodation. The waiting lists for return visits to these treehouse destinations often stretch longer than initial booking queues, as first-time guests become devoted advocates for elevated living. The exclusivity created by forest carrying capacity limitations means that securing future reservations requires advanced planning measured in seasons rather than weeks. But the anticipation only enhances the experience, building excitement for adventures that cannot be rushed or replicated through any other means. The influence of treehouse architecture on conventional building design becomes increasingly apparent as architects and developers recognize the appeal of structures that work with, rather than against, natural systems. Elements like passive climate control, renewable energy integration, and flexible structural systems that respond to environmental changes begin appearing in ground-based construction projects inspired by lessons learned in the forest canopy. As you settle into your conventional bed tonight, perhaps in a building that stands solidly on foundation rather than swaying gently with living supports, remember that somewhere above the forest floor, other travelers are discovering what human beings gave up when we convinced ourselves that solid ground and artificial environments were all we needed for shelter. In those elevated sanctuaries, suspended between earth and sky, they're rediscovering the profound. See among the giant's peace that comes from sleeping, rattled by branches that have weathered centuries of storms while reaching always toward the light. The dreams that visit you in your static bedroom may carry whispers of wind through leaves, echoes of a way of living that honors both human comfort and natural wisdom. And perhaps, if you listen carefully to those whispered invitations from the forest canopy, you'll find yourself planning your own ascent into the realm where luxury meets nature, where architecture dances with biology, and where falling asleep means trusting yourself to the gentle care of trees that have been perfecting the art of reaching toward heaven for longer than human civilization has existed. The booking process for these extraordinary elevated sanctuaries typically begins months before your intended stay, with applications that read more like expeditions than hotel reservations. Properties often require detailed questionnaires about your comfort level with heights, your physical fitness for navigating elevated walkways, and even your philosophical approach to disconnecting from ground-based living. The most exclusive installations maintain guest screening processes that evaluate not just your ability to pay, but your genuine appreciation for the transformative potential of sleeping among the ancient giants. The pre-arrival preparation packages arrive weeks before your departure, containing everything from specialized weather-resistant clothing recommendations to meditation exercises designed to help your nervous system adapt to the unique sensory environment of canopy living. Some properties include audio recordings of forest soundscapes to help you acclimate to the complex acoustic environment you'll soon inhabit. The preparation materials often feature detailed botanical guides to the tree species you'll be living among, transforming your upcoming stay from a simple accommodation into an immersive educational experience. The transportation to these remote forest locations becomes part of the adventure itself, often involving combinations of flights, drives along increasingly narrow forest roads, and finally hikes through old-growth wilderness that hasn't been modified for tourist convenience. The last mile to your treehouse destination frequently requires leaving wheeled vehicles behind entirely, with your luggage transferred to pack animals or carried by porters who've spent years perfecting the logistics of moving human necessities into environments where human presence was never intended. The ground-level staging areas for these elevated accommodations represent masterpieces of invisible infrastructure, containing all the mechanical systems, storage facilities, and support equipment needed to maintain luxury accommodations hundreds of feet overhead. These base camps typically include emergency medical facilities, communication centers, and maintenance workshops that would impress any expedition leader. The staff quarters often feature amenities that rival the guest accommodations, recognizing that maintaining treehouse hotels requires teams of professionals willing to make careers out of vertical living. The safety briefings conducted before your ascent to the canopy cover protocols that simply don't exist in conventional hospitality. You learn the proper techniques for moving along elevated walkways during high winds, the emergency signals that can summon help across vertical distances that challenge normal communication, and the wildlife etiquette required for temporary residents in ecosystems where humans rank somewhere in the middle of the food chain. The briefings often include basic tree biology, helping you understand how your temporary home continues growing and changing, even while supporting your elevated lifestyle. The ascent systems employed by different treehouse installations showcase the ingenuity required to transport humans and their belongings into environments that evolution never intended us to inhabit permanently. Some properties feature spiral staircases that wrap around massive trunks, their handrails following the natural curves and irregularities of living bark. Others employ cable lift systems that glide silently through the forest layers, offering passengers a vertical tour through different ecological zones as they rise from forest floor to canopy. The most sophisticated installations feature multi-stage elevation systems that pause at intermediate platforms, allowing guests to acclimate gradually to the psychological and physiological changes that come with extreme height. These rest stops often include observation decks, where you can study the forest architecture from perspectives that ground-based humans rarely experience. The intermediate platforms frequently house interpretive displays, explaining the complex relationships between different canopy levels, turning your journey to your aerial bedroom into an educational experience that rivals any natural history museum. The final approach to your treehouse accommodation typically involves crossing suspension bridges that test your commitment to elevated living while providing dramatic views of the forest canopy stretching to distant horizons. These bridges sway gently with every step, their movement synchronized with the natural oscillations of their support trees. The engineering required to create stable walkways between living supports that grow and move independently represents some of the most innovative structural work being done anywhere in the world. The moment you first step onto your personal platform, suspended hundreds of feet above solid ground, triggers psychological responses that most humans never experience in their ground-based lives. The slight give in the decking, the nearly imperceptible sway that reminds you you're standing on a living foundation, activates ancient balance systems that have remained dormant since childhood. Your inner ear recalibrates to account for the constant subtle motion, while your visual system adapts to depth perceptions that include both forest floor far below and sky canopy extending overhead. The key ceremony that grants you access to your elevated sanctuary carries symbolic weight beyond simple hotel check-in procedures. These aren't mass-produced electronic cards, but individually crafted objects that reflect the unique character of each installation. Some properties use traditional skeleton keys carved from fallen branches of the host trees, while others employ biometric systems that recognize your individual characteristics while remaining invisible within the natural architecture. The act of unlocking your treehouse door feels ceremonial, marking your transition from ground-dwelling visitor to temporary canopy resident. The interior reveal of these elevated chambers consistently exceeds expectations shaped by exterior views that often camouflage the luxury contained within organic architecture. Spaces that appeared modest from outside unfold into carefully designed environments that maximize both comfort and connection with the surrounding forest. Floor-to-ceiling windows disappear entirely when opened, eliminating barriers between interior and exterior, while maintaining climate control through ingenious natural ventilation systems that work with rather than against forest air currents. The furniture in these elevated rooms represents custom craftsmanship that addresses challenges that conventional interior designers never face. Every piece must be lightweight enough for tree branches to support, while remaining sturdy enough for normal use. Chairs and tables often incorporate flexibility that allows them to move naturally with the structure's subtle motion, while storage solutions must secure belongings against the possibility of items falling through gaps in flooring to disappear forever in the forest floor hundreds of feet below. The bedding systems in treehouse accommodations represent innovations in sleep technology that ground-based hotels are only beginning to adopt. Mattresses often feature responsive materials that adapt to the gentle rocking motion of the structure, enhancing rather than fighting the natural movement. The bed frames themselves typically integrate with the tree's architecture, sometimes built around living branches that continue growing through the bedroom space. Pillows and blankets frequently incorporate natural fibers that complement the forest environment while providing luxury comparable to the finest ground-based accommodations. The bathroom facilities in these elevated sanctuaries showcase engineering solutions that would impress any mechanical contractor while remaining completely invisible to guests focused on the extraordinary views available through strategically placed windows. Hot water systems often incorporate solar collectors integrated seamlessly into platform surfaces, while waste management systems transform human byproducts into fertilizer for the host trees. The shower experiences frequently include options for both enclosed bathing and open-air cleansing under nothing but sky and leaves. The kitchen facilities in larger treehouse installations demonstrate that elevated living doesn't require sacrificing culinary sophistication. Appliances designed for marine use often provide the reliability and efficiency needed for locations where service calls require climbing hundreds of feet through forest canopy. Refrigeration systems operate silently to avoid disturbing wildlife, while cooking ventilation disperses aromas without creating fire hazards in the surrounding vegetation. The herb gardens, often integrated into kitchen window systems, provide seasoning that tastes more intense than ground-grown equivalents, perhaps because of increased ultraviolet exposure or simply the reverence that comes from harvesting ingredients while suspended among the clouds. The lighting systems in these elevated environments represent masterpieces of illumination design that enhance rather than compete with natural light cycles. Daytime lighting often relies entirely on solar illumination, filtered and directed through ingenious arrangements of mirrors and light pipes that bring sunshine deep into interior spaces without artificial energy consumption. Evening lighting transitions gradually from warm daylight tones to the deep reds and oranges that promote natural melatonin production, helping guests synchronize their sleep cycles with forest rhythms rather than artificial schedules. The climate control systems in treehouse accommodations work with rather than against natural temperature regulation provided by the forest environment. The thermal mass of living wood moderates temperature swings, while the transpiration cooling effect of surrounding vegetation creates natural air conditioning that often eliminates the need for mechanical systems. Heating requirements are minimized through passive solar design and the windbreak protection provided by forest canopy, while cooling needs rarely arise in the naturally climate-controlled environment created by thousands of acres of photosynthesizing leaves. The communication systems that connect these remote installations to emergency services and the outside world often represent the most advanced technology present in otherwise deliberately primitive environments. Satellite internet and cellular boosters provide connectivity when needed, while weather monitoring stations offer real-time data on conditions that can change rapidly at canopy level. Emergency communication systems include backup power sources and redundant signal paths that ensure help can be summoned even during severe weather events that might disable conventional communication methods. The daily rhythms of treehouse living follow patterns that urban dwellers have forgotten existed, synchronized with solar cycles rather than artificial schedules. Without electric lighting to extend productive hours indefinitely, you find yourself naturally winding down as daylight fades, your body rediscovering circadian rhythms that have been disrupted by decades of artificial illumination. The absence of blue light from screens allows melatonin production to follow its ancient schedule, triggered by the dimming of natural light rather than arbitrary decisions to power down electronic devices. The morning awakening process in these elevated bedrooms feels fundamentally different from ground-based sleep experiences, as if you're emerging from the same dream that's been nurturing the forest throughout the night. The transition from unconsciousness to awareness happens gradually, organically, synchronized with the forest's own awakening, rather than jarred into alertness by mechanical alarms. Your body feels more aligned with natural rhythms, more connected to the seasonal and daily cycles that govern the lives of your temporary neighbors in the canopy community. The breakfast preparation rituals in treehouse kitchens take on ceremonial significance as you handle ingredients that traveled extraordinary distances to reach your aerial pantry. Every component of your morning meal has a story of vertical transportation, from coffee beans lifted by pulley systems to fresh produce carried up spiral staircases wrapped around living tree trunks. The cooking process itself feels more intentional when conducted hundreds of feet above ground, with every flame and every seasoning decision made with awareness that you're preparing food in an environment where humans were never meant to dwell permanently. The daily maintenance routines required for these elevated structures involve tasks that don't exist in conventional accommodations, from checking weather stripping around windows that must seal against wind-driven rain, to securing outdoor furniture that could become dangerous projectiles during storms. Guests often find themselves participating in these maintenance activities, not from obligation, but from genuine curiosity about the engineering required to maintain luxury accommodations in environments that challenge every assumption about human habitation. The wildlife observation opportunities available from these elevated platforms provide access to animal behaviors that remain hidden from ground-based observers. The daily activities of squirrel families become entertainment as engaging as any television program, while the territorial disputes and courtship rituals of various bird species unfold at eye level outside your bedroom windows. Many guests develop personal relationships with individual animals who treat the treehouse platforms as extensions of their natural highway system, leading to encounters that blur the boundary between human and wildlife habitats. The weather monitoring that becomes essential for treehouse residents reveals the complexity of meteorological systems that ground dwellers rarely consider. Barometric pressure changes become physically noticeable as your inner ear responds to atmospheric shifts, while wind patterns become visible through the movement of branches at different elevations. The approaching weather systems announce themselves through changes in wildlife behavior, shifts in forest acoustics, and alterations in the quality of light filtering through the canopy layers. The seasonal transitions visible from these elevated vantage points unfold with dramatic clarity, unavailable to surface-bound observers, as you witness the forest's annual cycles from within the very systems that drive those changes. Spring's arrival becomes a personal experience as you watch buds break on branches just outside your windows, while autumn's color transformation surrounds you in three-dimensional displays that no ground-based observer could match. Winter's stark beauty reveals the essential architecture of both forest and treehouse, stripping away decorative elements to expose the fundamental engineering that allows human comfort to coexist with natural systems. The departure preparation from these elevated sanctuaries often extends over several days as guests attempt to memorize sensations and perspectives that cannot be replicated in ground-based environments. The process of packing belongings that have become accustomed to gentle motion and pure forest air feels like preparing artifacts for transport to an alien world, where artificial lighting and mechanical vent reluctant to complete their descentillation have replaced the subtle magic of natural systems. Many guests find themselves lingering on platforms and walkways as they try to absorb final moments of perspective that elevated only living provides. The descent journey back to ground level provides dramatic perspective on the experience you're leaving behind, as the forest canopy that concealed your elevated refuge gradually rises above you until the platforms and walkways that were your home disappear entirely among the leaves and branches. The psychological transition from three-dimensional canopy, living back to the horizontal limitations of surface existence, often feels more challenging than the original ascent, as you surrender the expanded awareness that comes from sleeping among the clouds in favor of the safe but restricted viewpoint of ground-based life. The integration back into conventional accommodations reveals how profoundly the treehouse experience has altered your relationship with built environments and the natural world that all human structures ultimately depend upon. Standard hotel rooms feel cramped and artificial after nights spent surrounded by living architecture that breathes and grows, while the mechanical sounds of air conditioning and artificial lighting seem harsh and intrusive compared to the subtle symphony of wind through leaves and the ever-changing illumination provided by sunlight filtered through forest canopy. The long-term effects of treehouse living continue months and years after their elevated adventures, conclude to influence guests for awareness of natural, fundamentally altering their cycles and their appreciation for the complex systems that support all life on Earth. Many report permanent changes in sleep patterns as their bodies maintain synchronization with natural light cycles, while their enhanced sensitivity to weather patterns and seasonal changes persists long after returning to urban environments, where such awareness seems superfluous but never entirely disappears. The photographic documentation of these elevated experiences takes on significance beyond typical vacation memories, serving as proof that alternative relationships with the natural world remain possible even in an increasingly urbanized global society. Images captured from treehouse platforms provide perspectives that cannot be replicated from ground level, while the technical challenges of photography in environments with constantly changing natural lighting create opportunities for artistic expression that conventional settings cannot match. The stories shared by treehouse veterans carry evangelical fervor as they attempt to convey experiences that have no equivalent in surface-based living, describing sensations and perspectives that sound fantastical to listeners whose highest sleeping experiences involved second-story bedrooms or high-rise hotel rooms. Yet the consistency of reports across multiple independent sources, combined with the specific technical details of engineering marvels and the profound environmental awareness described by returning guests, gradually convinces skeptics that these aerial sanctuaries represent genuine alternatives to conventional human habitation. The influence of treehouse architecture on mainstream building design becomes increasingly apparent as architects and developers recognize the appeal of structures that enhance natural settings, incorporating rather than dominate their lessons learned in forest canopies into ground-based construction projects that prioritize harmony with natural systems over conquest of environmental challenges. Elements like passive climate control, renewable energy integration, and flexible structural systems that respond to environmental changes begin appearing in conventional buildings inspired by the innovations pioneered in elevated forest installations. The waiting lists for return visits to these treehouse destinations grow longer with each passing season, as first-time guests become devoted advocates for elevated living, who understand that the transformation achieved through sleeping among the giants cannot be replicated through any other means. The anticipation that builds during months of planning adds intensity to experiences that already transcend conventional accommodation, creating adventures that begin with reservation confirmations and continue through years of changed perspective on humanity's relationship with the natural world that sustains all life on our remarkable planet. The conservation efforts surrounding these treehouse installations represent a fascinating partnership between luxury hospitality and environmental stewardship that challenges conventional assumptions about tourism's impact on pristine ecosystems. Unlike traditional resort development that typically requires clearing natural vegetation and disrupting wildlife habitats, these elevated accommodations actually enhance forest health through careful monitoring and active ecosystem management. The operators often employ full-time naturalists and arborists who track the well-being of host trees, monitor wildlife populations, and ensure that human presence contributes positively to forest biodiversity rather than diminishing it. The research opportunities provided by these elevated platforms attract scientists from universities around the world who recognize the unique access to canopy ecosystems that these installations provide. Long-term studies on tree growth patterns, wildlife behavior, and climate change effects benefit from observation points that would be prohibitively expensive to construct solely for research purposes. The data collected from these sites contributes to our understanding of forest dynamics, while the hospitality revenue helps fund conservation efforts that protect vast acreages of old-growth habitat from development pressures. The construction materials used in these aerial structures tell stories of innovation driven by environmental necessity, as traditional building supplies prove either too heavy for tree branches or too environmentally damaging for forest settings. Advanced composites developed for aerospace applications provide strength-to-weight ratios that make elevated construction possible, while bio-based materials derived from agricultural waste offer sustainable alternatives to petroleum-based products. Some installations even incorporate living building materials using specially cultivated mosses and lichens that continue growing as integral parts of the structure's weather protection and insulation systems. The craftspeople who specialize in treehouse construction represent a unique fusion of traditional woodworking skills and cutting-edge engineering knowledge, combining techniques passed down through generations of furniture makers with structural analysis software and materials science innovations. These artisans often spend years developing relationships with individual trees, understanding their growth patterns and seasonal movements before designing structures that will age gracefully alongside their living foundations. The most experienced treehouse builders can predict how a structure will settle and adapt over decades of growth, creating joints and connections that accommodate change rather than fighting against natural processes. The insurance industry has had to develop entirely new risk assessment models for these elevated accommodations, evaluating hazards that don't exist in conventional hospitality, while recognizing the unique safety advantages of structures that sway with storms rather than resisting them rigidly. Actuaries must consider factors like tree health assessments, wind load calculations for flexible structures, and evacuation procedures for elevated locations, while also acknowledging the reduced risks associated with buildings that can't flood, rarely face break-ins, and exist in environments where fire spreads slowly through living wood rather than racing through dried construction materials. The guest services provided in these elevated environments require staff members who combine hospitality skills with outdoor recreation expertise, arboricultural knowledge, and sometimes emergency medical training for situations where conventional help might be hours away. The housekeeping teams develop techniques for maintaining luxury standards while working hundreds of feet off the ground, often using specialized equipment borrowed from window washing and building maintenance industries adapted for forest environments. Concierge services expand beyond restaurant recommendations to include wildlife viewing schedules, weather pattern predictions, and guidance on forest etiquette that helps guests minimize their impact on the ecosystems they're temporarily joining. The menu planning for Treehouse restaurants involves considerations that ground-based establishments never face, from the logistics of transporting fresh ingredients up into the canopy to the storage challenges of elevated pantries where every cubic foot of space must be optimized for both efficiency and weight distribution. Many installations develop relationships with local foragers who can identify edible plants growing at different canopy levels, creating unique dining experiences where ingredients are harvested from the same trees that support the dining platforms. The wine cellars in these establishments often take advantage of the stable temperatures provided by tree trunks and forest canopy, creating aging environments that rival underground caves, while offering accessibility that traditional cellars cannot match. The educational programs developed around these treehouse installations provide immersive learning experiences that transform guests into temporary forest residents rather than passive observers of natural systems. Guided tours led by resident naturalists reveal the complex relationships between different canopy layers, explaining how nutrients cycle through forest ecosystems and how various species have adapted to life at different elevations. The hands-on workshops often include instruction in traditional forest crafts, sustainable living practices, and conservation techniques that guests can apply in their own communities long after returning from their elevated adventures. The technological infrastructure required to support these remote elevated accommodations pushes the boundaries of off-grid living while maintaining the reliability that luxury hospitality demands. Solar panel arrays must be positioned to maximize energy collection without interfering with tree growth or wildlife movement, while battery storage systems must provide consistent power through extended periods of cloudy weather or equipment maintenance. The water treatment facilities often incorporate biological systems that actually improve local water quality, turning what could be environmental liabilities into ecological assets that benefit the entire forest watershed. The seasonal staffing challenges faced by these remote installations require recruitment strategies that attract individuals capable of thriving in isolated environments while maintaining hospitality standards that rival urban luxury hotels. Many properties develop relationships with outdoor education programs, adventure tourism companies, and environmental organizations to identify candidates who combine customer service skills with wilderness expertise and genuine passion for forest conservation. The training programs for new staff often include intensive courses in tree biology, wildlife behavior, and forest safety protocols that prepare employees for responsibilities that extend far beyond conventional hospitality roles. The maintenance schedules for these elevated structures must accommodate both guest comfort and forest health, timing major repairs around wildlife breeding seasons and coordinating construction activities with natural growth cycles that affect accessibility and safety. The specialized equipment required for canopy maintenance often includes tools borrowed from utility companies, tree surgery operations, and high-rise building maintenance crews adapted for use in living environments where every anchor point grows and changes over time. The preventive maintenance programs focus on early detection of potential problems, recognizing that repairs become exponentially more complex and expensive when conducted hundreds of feet above ground in remote forest locations. The community relationships developed by these treehouse installations often extend far beyond typical business partnerships to include collaborations with indigenous communities who possess generations of knowledge about forest ecosystems and sustainable living practices. many properties incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into their operations, learning from local experts who understand the subtle signs that predict weather changes, the seasonal movements of wildlife, and the optimal times for various forest management activities. These partnerships often result in employment opportunities for community members while preserving cultural traditions that might otherwise be lost as younger generations migrate to urban areas. The waste reduction strategies employed by these remote installations demonstrate that luxury and sustainability designers approach environmental challenges as can coexist beautifully when opportunities for innovation rather than obstacles to overcome. Composting systems turn organic waste into fertilizer for the host trees, while grey water recycling creates irrigation systems that support food gardens and native plant restoration projects. The packaging reduction programs often involve negotiations with suppliers to eliminate unnecessary wrapping in containers, replacing single-use items with durable alternatives that can withstand the transportation challenges of reaching elevated locations. The wildlife management protocols developed for these elevated accommodations require delicate balancing acts between guest safety and animal welfare, creating guidelines that protect both human visitors and forest residents while allowing natural behaviours to continue undisturbed. The staff training includes instruction in reading animal body language, understanding territorial boundaries, and recognising signs of stress or aggression that might indicate when human activity should be modified or suspended. The feeding policies strictly prohibit any interaction with wildlife that could alter natural foraging patterns or create dependency relationships that might persist long after guests depart. The emergency response procedures for these elevated locations involve coordination between on-site staff, local emergency services, and specialised rescue teams trained in high-angle access and forest environments. The communication systems include multiple redundant methods for summoning help, while the medical facilities often exceed those found in ground-based hotels due to the extended response times that might be required for serious emergencies. The evacuation plans account for various scenarios including severe weather, structural damage, and medical emergencies that might require rapid transport to ground level and conventional medical facilities. The booking policies for these exclusive installations often include detailed questionnaires designed to ensure compatibility between guest expectations and the realities of elevated forest living, screening for individuals who will appreciate the unique challenges and rewards of sleeping among the trees rather than expecting conventional hotel amenities in an unconventional setting. The preparation materials provided to confirmed guests include everything from packing lists tailored to canopy environments to meditation exercises designed to help nervous systems adapt to the gentle motion and acoustic complexity of treehouse living. The cancellation policies often reflect the difficulty of filling bookings on short notice, while acknowledging that weather conditions or personal circumstances might make elevated accommodation inadvisable. The architectural awards recognition received by the most innovative treehouse installations highlights the growing acceptance of these structures as legitimate contributions to contemporary design thinking, demonstrating that buildings can enhance natural environments rather than dominating them. The design competitions specifically focused on elevated architecture encourage continued innovation in sustainable building practices, while showcasing the aesthetic possibilities available when human creativity collaborates with natural systems, rather than imposing artificial forms upon unwilling landscapes. The professional development opportunities for architects interested in treehouse design often include specialized courses in tree biology, forest ecology, and biomechanics that expand traditional architectural education to encompass living systems as integral components of structural design. The cultural impact of these treehouse installations extends beyond their immediate guests to influence broader conversations about humanity's relationship with natural systems and the possibilities for sustainable luxury that doesn't require environmental destruction. The media coverage of these elevated accommodations often focuses on the innovation and beauty of the structures themselves, while subtly educating readers about forest conservation and the importance of maintaining intact ecosystems for human well-being. The social media presence of these installations carefully balances promotion with education, sharing images that inspire wanderlust while providing information about the conservation efforts and sustainable practices that make such luxury possible without environmental compromise. The future development of Treehouse hospitality appears to be moving toward even greater integration with forest ecosystems, with planned installations that will incorporate living walls, integrated food production systems, and biological waste treatment facilities that actually improve forest health rather than simply minimizing environmental impact. The research partnerships with universities and environmental organizations continue to expand, creating opportunities for guests to participate in citizen science projects while enjoying their elevated accommodations. The technology integration focuses on systems that enhance rather than replace natural environmental controls, using sensors and automation to optimize energy efficiency while maintaining the connection to natural rhythms that makes treehouse living so transformative. The investment opportunities in treehouse hospitality attract developers who recognize the growing demand for authentic luxury experiences that align with environmental values rather than contradicting them, creating business models that generate profits through conservation rather than exploitation. The financing structures often include environmental impact bonds and conservation easements that protect surrounding forest lands in perpetuity, while providing revenue streams that support both hospitality operations and habitat protection. The return on investment calculations must account for longer development timelines and higher construction costs, while recognizing the premium pricing that unique experiences can command in increasingly crowded luxury hospitality markets. The training programs for Treehouse hospitality professionals are developing into specialized career paths that combine traditional hospitality management with outdoor education, environmental science, and adventure tourism expertise. The certification programs recognize the unique skill sets required for elevated accommodation management, while establishing professional standards that ensure guest safety and environmental protection. The career advancement opportunities in this growing field attract individuals seeking meaningful work that combines customer service with conservation goals, creating employment opportunities in rural communities while preserving the natural resources that make such developments possible. The guest testimonials from these elevated experiences consistently describe transformational encounters with natural systems that urban living had convinced them were irrelevant to human happiness and well-being. The follow-up surveys conducted months after visits reveal lasting changes in sleep patterns, environmental awareness, and appreciation for natural systems that persist long after guests return to conventional accommodations. The repeat visitor statistics demonstrate loyalty rates that exceed those of traditional luxury hotels, suggesting that the profound personal impact of treehouse living creates emotional connections that transcend typical customer satisfaction metrics. The collaborative relationships between different treehouse installations worldwide create informal networks for sharing best practices, innovation developments, and conservation strategies that benefit the entire industry, while advancing the broader goals of sustainable tourism and environmental education. The professional conferences focused on elevated accommodation bring together architects, hospitality professionals, conservationists, and researchers to discuss emerging challenges and opportunities in this rapidly evolving field. The information sharing includes everything from technical construction details to guest service innovations, creating collective wisdom that accelerates development while maintaining the environmental standards that make treehouse hospitality both possible and responsible. The climate change adaptation strategies being developed for these forest-based accommodations recognize that elevated structures may offer unique advantages as weather patterns become more extreme and unpredictable. The flexible design principles that allow buildings to move with wind and weather may prove increasingly valuable as storm intensities increase, while the forest canopy locations provide natural climate moderation that ground-based structures cannot match. The long-term planning for these installations includes considerations of species migration, changing precipitation patterns, and shifting seasonal cycles that will affect both forest health and guest experiences over the decades. These structures are designed to last. As the treehouse hospitality industry continues evolving toward greater sustainability and deeper integration with natural systems, the original promise of these elevated sanctuaries becomes increasingly relevant to broader conversations about human habitation and environmental stewardship. The lessons learned from successful treehouse installations offer insights applicable to conventional architecture, urban planning, and residential design that could help transform how human beings live on a planet whose natural systems we depend upon for survival. The guests who experience these elevated accommodations return to their ground-based lives, carrying memories and perspectives that may influence decisions about energy consumption, urban design preferences, and conservation priorities for years to come. The waiting lists for these extraordinary elevated experiences continue growing as word spreads about accommodations that offer more than luxury amenities or scenic views, providing instead opportunities for genuine transformation through immersion in natural systems that most humans have forgotten how to perceive or appreciate. The booking confirmations arrive like invitations to remembering what human beings gave up when we convinced ourselves that artificial environments were adequate substitutes for the living systems that shaped our evolution and continue supporting our existence on the only planet we'll ever call home. The final preparations for your own eventual ascent into these aerial sanctuaries begin not with packing lists or travel arrangements, but with opening your awareness to the possibility that sleeping among the giants might awaken parts of yourself that have been dormant since childhood, when climbing trees felt like the most natural thing in the world, and the ground below seemed less like safety than limitation. The journey upward into the canopy carries you not just hundreds of feet above the forest floor, but centuries back toward ways of living that honored the interconnection between human well-being and the health of the natural systems that make all life possible. The morning after your descent from the Treehouse Skyscraper brings a peculiar form of reverse culture shock that no amount of preparation can adequately predict. You wake up in a conventional bed that feels unnaturally still, its motionless surface somehow wrong after nights spent cradled in the gentle rhythm of living architecture. The ceiling above you appears oppressively low and static, lacking the organic curves and breathing spaces that made your elevated bedroom feel infinite despite its modest dimensions. Your body searches instinctively for the subtle cues that governed your forest schedule. The absence of birdsongs at precise dawn intervals leaves you feeling unmoored, while artificial lighting seems harsh and intrusive compared to the gradual illumination that filtered through leaves to wake you naturally. The air feels thin and processed, stripped of the complex aromatic layers that made every breath in the canopy a form of aromatherapy combining pine resin, decomposing leaves, and the green scent of photosynthesis happening all around you. The shower experience in your ground-based bathroom feels claustrophobic and mechanical after mornings spent bathing while surrounded by nothing but sky and forest. The water pressure feels aggressive rather than refreshing, while the enclosed space makes you yearn for the open-air cleansing rituals where steam from your hot water mingled with morning mist, rising from the forest floor hundreds of feet below. Even the towels feel different, lacking the fresh forest scent that permeated everything in your elevated sanctuary. Breakfast preparation becomes an exercise in missing complexity you never knew you craved. The ingredients arrive at your kitchen without stories of vertical transportation or weathering storms while suspended in the canopy. The cooking process feels routine and uninspired compared to preparing meals while surrounded by the active ecosystem that would eventually compost your scraps and benefit from your grey water. The morning light streaming through conventional windows appears flat and unchanging, lacking the constantly shifting patterns created by thousands of leaves dancing in forest breezes. The commute to whatever obligations await your return to horizontal living feels surreal as you navigate traffic while your mind remains partially suspended among the trees. The urban landscape appears more artificial than before, its concrete and steel infrastructure seeming crude compared to the elegant engineering solutions you witnessed in the forest canopy. Every building looks like it was imposed upon the landscape rather than growing from it, while the absence of living elements in the built environment creates a sense of isolation you hadn't noticed before your aerial education. Your colleagues and friends notice changes they can't quite identify, commenting that you seem different somehow, more grounded, despite having spent days suspended hundreds of feet off the ground. Your sleep patterns confuse those around you as you naturally wind down with sunset and wake with dawn, no longer requiring artificial stimulation to maintain alertness or chemical assistance to achieve rest. The enhanced awareness of weather patterns makes you appear almost prophetic as you accurately predict atmospheric changes, hours before they become obvious to those who haven't learned to read the subtle signs that trees broadcast continuously. The photographs from your treehouse experience become more than mere documentation, serving as portals back to perspectives that conventional living cannot provide. Each image carries sensory memories that transport you instantly back to the feeling of swaying gently in the arms of giants, the sound of wind through leaves creating nature's most sophisticated sound system, and the profound peace that comes from existing in harmony with rather than dominance over natural systems. The images attract attention from others who've never considered that human accommodation could work with rather than against the environment, sparking conversations about sustainability and the possibilities for architecture that enhances rather than destroys the ecosystems it inhabits. The planning for return visits begins almost immediately, driven not by nostalgia, but by recognition that the elevated perspective fundamentally altered your relationship with the built environment and natural world. The waiting lists that stretch for months or years no longer seem like obstacles, but like necessary preparation periods for experiences that cannot be rushed or replicated through any other means. The anticipation builds slowly, creating excitement for adventures that exist nowhere else on Earth. Your daily routines incorporate lessons learned from forest living as you find yourself seeking out natural lighting whenever possible, opening windows to invite outside air into indoor spaces, and choosing accommodations that offer some connection to living systems rather than complete isolation from the natural world. The enhanced sensitivity to environmental quality makes you more selective about where you choose to spend time, gravitating towards spaces that honor rather than ignore the ecological relationships that support all human activity. The stories you share about sleeping among the giants take on missionary fervor as you attempt to convey experiences that sound fantastical to listeners whose highest sleeping adventures involved hotel rooms on upper floors of urban buildings. The specific details of engineering marvels, the profound environmental awareness that develops through immersion in forest systems, and the transformational peace that comes from trusting yourself to living architecture gradually convince skeptics that these aerial sanctuaries represent genuine alternatives to conventional human habitation. The influence of your treehouse experience extends beyond personal transformation to affect decisions about everything from home design preferences to vacation destinations and investment choices. The memory of waking up surrounded by forest becomes a benchmark against which all other accommodations are measured, while the understanding of what luxury truly means shifts from material excess to experiences that connect you more deeply with the natural systems that make all life possible. The conversations sparked by your elevated adventure introduce others to possibilities they never considered, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate circle. Friends begin seeking out accommodations that prioritize environmental harmony over conventional amenities, while family members express interest in their own treehouse adventures despite initial skepticism about sleeping so far above solid ground. The transformation spreads quietly through social networks as people discover that luxury and sustainability can not only coexist, but actually enhance each other when properly understood. The long-term effects continue revealing themselves months and years after your return to ground-based living. as the enhanced awareness of natural cycles and environmental relationships persists in ways that surprise even you. The ability to predict weather changes through subtle environmental cues remains sharp long after leaving the forest, while the appreciation for the complex systems that support all human activity influences decisions about consumption, transportation, and lifestyle choices that seemed unrelated to your elevated adventure. The booking confirmation for your next Treehouse experience arrives like a promise of return to a way of being that feels more authentic than the artificial environments where most human life now unfolds. The preparation materials that accompany your reservations serve as reminders of the profound peace awaiting in the forest canopy, where sleeping among the giants offers not just unique accommodation, but genuine transformation through reconnection with the living systems that shaped human evolution and continue supporting our existence on the only planet we'll ever call home. The final nights in your conventional bed carry whispered promises of return to the gentle rhythm of trees that have perfected the art of reaching toward light, while remaining rooted in earth, swaying with storms while maintaining their essential strength, and creating homes for countless creatures, while continuing their own slow, patient growth toward the sky. In those elevated sanctuaries, suspended between earth and heaven, you discovered not just an extraordinary place to sleep, but a way of being that honors both human comfort and the natural wisdom of forests that have been creating perfect architecture for millions of years before humans learned to build anything at all. So here we are at the end of our journey through the canopy, having explored every aspect of what it means to fall asleep 500 feet above the ground in these remarkable treehouse skyscrapers. We've climbed through the engineering marvels that make such structures possible, swayed with the seasonal rhythms that transform these elevated bedrooms throughout the year, and discovered how sleeping among the giants can fundamentally alter your relationship with both the built environment and the natural world that sustains all life on Earth. These aren't just luxury accommodations or unique vacation experiences. They're glimpses into a future where human habitation enhances rather than destroys the ecosystems we depend upon, where architecture dances with biology rather than dominating it, and where falling asleep means trusting yourself to the gentle care of living systems that have been perfecting their craft for millennia. From the moment you first climb those spiral staircases wrapped around ancient trunks to the bittersweet descent back to ground-based living, these elevated sanctuaries offer something that no conventional hotel ever could: a chance to remember what we gave up when we convinced ourselves that artificial environments were all we needed for shelter and peace. The dreams that visit you in these swaying bedrooms, the profound silence broken only by wind through leaves, the morning light filtered through a living cathedral of branches. All of it serves as a reminder that human beings once knew how to live in harmony with the natural world. And perhaps, if we listen carefully to the whispered invitations from the forest canopy, we might find our way back to that ancient wisdom, one tree house at a time. Tonight, as you settle into whatever bed awaits you, remember that somewhere above the forest floor, travelers are discovering the profound peace that comes from sleeping among the clouds, cradled in the arms of giants that have stood sentinel over the earth for centuries beyond counting. Sweet dreams wherever you may rest your head.